There are nights when I lie awake for a long time. My mind completely still, yet I just can't fall asleep. In those moments, I would quietly play a Dharma, talk about compassion, and simply listen, nothing more. Now, I'd like to read it again for you, slowly, word by word, with the hope that you feel the same gentle peace that I once did.
Have you ever tried to fall asleep with your thoughts spinning like 1,000 fireflies in a jar, darting from worry to memory to tomorrow's unknown? It's as if your mind clings to fragments of control, even as the night softly invites you to let go. But what if you didn't have to fight this restlessness? What if peace wasn't found by stopping the chaos, but by seeing through it? When you open your heart to the truth of impermanence, and let the 5 remembrances gently settle into your awareness, something within begins to shift. You stop resisting the natural current of change. You no longer chase permanence in things that were never meant to stay. And from that clarity, a quiet question rises like mist. If everything is always changing, if loss is certain, if control is only an illusion, then where can peace be found? The answer doesn't come from forcing things to stay still. It doesn't come from pretending life will always make sense. Instead, peace arises from seeing the deeper order beneath the motion, not by erasing the chaos, but by noticing the harmony that already lives within it. This is where the mandala principle begins to speak. In Tibetan Buddhism, the mandala is far more than a beautiful image, it's a living map of reality. It doesn't just decorate sacred walls, it reveals the design hidden within life's complexity. It shows us that even when the outer world spins and fractures, something within still holds the center. At first glance, a mandala may seem intricate and overwhelming, filled with vivid colors, delicate patterns, and countless symbols, but the longer you rest your gaze upon it, something begins to shift. Your eyes are naturally drawn toward the center. And from that still point, each layer slowly begins to make sense. What once looked random reveals its rhythm. But this isn't just a visual experience. It's a teaching. The mandala quietly whispers, even within confusion. There is form, even inside suffering. There is a movement toward wholeness. The chaos that surrounds you isn't without structure. It only appears that way when you focus too narrowly on broken pieces. The mandala invites you to see differently, to take a wider view. You begin to pause your reactions to every twist and turn. And in that stillness, the hidden pattern begins to appear. What once felt like random pain starts to look more like unfolding. Like a dance you hadn't yet learned the steps to. You begin to see, what feels like disconnection might actually be part of a greater rhythm you haven't fully heard. A rhythm that takes time to reveal itself. This doesn't mean the journey becomes easy, but it does mean you stop feeling so lost inside the temporary. You begin to trust the deeper current flowing beneath life's surface. And in this context, trust is not passive resignation. It's not giving up or drifting. Trust becomes a grounded kind of participation, a willingness to move with something larger than your immediate emotions. You begin to speak, act, and respond from a place of alignment instead of panic. You no longer demand instant clarity. You accept that understanding may not come right away, and yet, meaning is still present. The mandala principle teaches that reality has layers. There is the surface, the day-to-day experiences, with all their joys, pressures, and unexpected turns. And then, deeper still, there is an inner pattern, an unseen intelligence shaping these events. It doesn't operate on your timeline. It doesn't ask for your permission, but it's there, quietly responding to your thoughts, actions, and intentions. In this view, even disorder serves a purpose. It isn't a sign of failure. In fact, it's often the breakdown before the breakthrough, the mess that comes right before a new kind of balance emerges. The chaos, the disorientation, the unknown, they are not outside the design. They are the design. They are the recalibration in progress. A mandala may not always appear symmetrical when you're standing too close. But if you step back, if you shift your perspective, you begin to see the harmony again. And that changes how you meet crisis. You stop labeling everything painful as a mistake. You begin to ask, what is this trying to show me? You stop resisting the unknown. And instead, you start holding space for what is still forming. This is the wisdom of the mandala. Understanding that true order is not the absence of change, but the deeper intelligence within change itself. It doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean letting life wash over you without direction. It means learning to act from a different place, a place of trust. Not fear. You no longer act from a need to control every outcome, but from an inner steadiness. You move from a quiet center, rather than reacting to the noise outside. And when your mind becomes still, really still, the mandala doesn't appear somewhere out there. It begins to form inside you. You start sensing the shape your life is taking. Not all at once, not with perfect clarity, but enough to keep you grounded as you keep moving forward. Tibetan monks create intricate mandalas out of colored sand. Grain by grain, hour after hour, sometimes for many weeks. They work with total presence, precision, discipline, and devotion. And when the mandala is complete, they destroy it, not out of disrespect, but as a teaching. Even beauty passes. Even perfect design returns to dust. But what remains, what truly lasts, is the energy, the discipline, the presence that built it. The mandala never dies. It transforms. And this is the invitation. To live your own life in the same way. To pour your heart into what you're creating now. Not because it will last forever, but because the way you create it is what shapes you. Your choices might not result in permanent success, but they leave imprints on your mind, your heart, your being. How you show up matters more than what you achieve. You begin to see your life as a living mandala. Each thought, each conversation, each challenge, they're all part of the design. You may not always see the full picture, but it's forming, layer by layer, choice by choice, breath by breath. You may not know exactly where each decision leads, but you make it with awareness. And in doing so, you allow the pattern to emerge over time. And something beautiful begins to grow. Trust. Not the kind of trust that expects everything to go your way, but the kind that knows everything you experience can be shaped into something meaningful. You stop rushing toward clarity. You stop demanding closure. You begin to rest in the center of motion, knowing that even when the outer rings are spinning, the still point holds, and you can return to it. Through meditation, through silence, through honest reflection, that return, again and again, is what keeps the pattern from falling apart. This stability isn't external, it lives inside you. It becomes your compass when everything else feels uncertain. It becomes your place of refuge when the outside world gets loud. And the more often you return, the more the outer world starts reflecting that inner coherence. You begin to notice alignment where before there was only tension. You start recognizing right timing, where you once only saw delay. The mandala also reminds you of something essential. You are not separate from the whole. Every small part matters. Each gesture of presence, each act of attention, supports the balance of the greater pattern. You begin to treat your actions with reverence. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you understand that even the smallest movement carries weight. You stop dismissing the little things. You realize that everything you do contributes to the design. And that brings integrity. It brings patience. It brings presence. You begin to notice when you've stepped out of alignment, not with self-judgment, but with gentle clarity. And from that place, you bring yourself back. You stop needing everything to be resolved right away. You learn to live in rhythm with unfolding. You listen more. You react less. You understand that time reveals the pattern, but only if you keep showing up with your whole self. This principle, this wisdom, can guide every part of life. In relationships, it helps you hold space for complexity. You stop needing every conversation to reach perfect understanding. You begin to trust that true connection deepens through presence, not through resolution. In your work, it reminds you to build with care, not urgency. You begin to value clarity more than speed. And in difficult times, it reminds you of this gentle truth. Chaos is often the beginning of reorganization, not the end of order. The mandala teaches that beauty does not come from perfection. It comes from coherence, from the quiet, invisible pattern that holds it all together. When your actions begin to reflect your deepest values, when the words you speak carry the clarity of your true intention, when your decisions arise from awareness rather than reaction, you begin to feel something quiet but unmistakable: harmony. Even when the outcome is uncertain, the pattern is strong. Even when the world around you seems messy or out of place, your alignment becomes part of the greater balance. This kind of view, this way of living, doesn't make you passive. On the contrary, it helps you participate in life more skillfully. You stop reacting out of fear. You begin to respond from a place of inner clarity. You take responsibility, not just for what you do, but how you do it. And the how begins to ripple outward. Others may not be able to name it, but they feel it. The world responds to it. And slowly, the pattern becomes visible again. And even when things fall apart, even when something you cared for begins to unravel, you don't panic like before. You remember the monks and the sand. You remember that every form fades, but the essence remains. And so you trust. You trust that the cycle will begin again, that the center is still there, holding everything in place. You trust that your own presence, calm, aware, will guide you to the next right step. The mandala principle doesn't erase difficulty. It holds it gently, placing it within the larger whole. It reminds you, the universe is not chaos pretending to be meaningful. It is meaning expressed through change. It is order that makes room for disorder. It is beauty that includes shadow. It is truth that still allows space for uncertainty. And when you begin to trust that, something shifts. You walk differently. You breathe more deeply. You speak more clearly. You stop moving from panic and begin to move from wisdom. Because now you know, even in the middle of disorder, something steady still holds. And your task is not to escape the chaos. Your task is to stand inside it, with open eyes, and help reveal the pattern that's waiting to be seen. Once you start to recognize the patterns hidden within disorder, once you begin to see that chaos is not a mistake but part of a greater rhythm, something within you begins to settle. The constant need to force, to fix, to rush, it dissolves. You stop chasing control. You listen. You align. And within that alignment, a different kind of energy begins to flow. An energy that has nothing to do with success, performance, or perfection, but everything to do with intention. It isn't measured. It isn't transactional. It is the most subtle, yet most powerful energy of all: connection. It is compassion. In Buddhist teaching, compassion is not just a feeling you wait to have. It is a way of being that you choose to embody. It's seen as the natural expression of wisdom. Because when you see clearly, when you understand that nothing lasts, and that all life is deeply, profoundly connected, compassion is the most honest response. It doesn't arise out of obligation. It arises from truth. It becomes the way you participate in the web of life. With gentleness, with integrity. Tibetan Buddhism often speaks of compassion as a kind of cosmic currency. Not in any material sense, but in a deeply spiritual one. The energy you offer to the world, the care you extend, the kindness you express, it comes back to you. Not always as success, not always as comfort, but as alignment, as clarity, as a quiet knowing that you are living in right relationship with life. The more compassion you give, the more trust you feel, not because everything goes your way, but because your heart is in harmony with the whole. Compassion restores trust where logic cannot. It bridges what division has broken. It helps you stay open, even when your mind wants to shut down. In moments of doubt, it is compassion, not answers, that carries you forward. Not because it solves the problem, but because it keeps your heart intact. And from that unbroken heart, a new path is always possible.
Sometimes, letting go doesn't come from a strong-willed decision. It comes from exhaustion, a quiet kind of tiredness that no longer resists. And in that moment, something soft begins to emerge. Not an answer, not strength, but a feeling that says, I can sit here with everything without needing to understand it all.
As you continue walking this path, something quiet but powerful begins to unfold. You start to realize that trust is not built from certainty. It is built from care. Care for your own experience. Care for the experience of others. Care that listens, softens, stays. And when you act with compassion, everything begins to shift. Your energy softens. Your decisions become less reactive. Your words become more thoughtful. And your listening deepens, not just to others, but also to yourself. This inner change ripples outward. It follows you into every room, every relationship, every conversation. Compassion doesn't weaken your boundaries. It strengthens them, because when you're rooted in care, you no longer need to defend with harshness. You can say no with gentleness. You can speak truth without needing to harm. Compassion transforms your actions. They are no longer just effort or performance. They become offerings. Compassion is not pity. It doesn't look down on suffering. It sees the other as part of itself. It recognizes pain, but doesn't try to erase it just to avoid discomfort. It holds space with presence, not pressure. It honors pain without needing to claim it. And in that space, quiet, tender, non-judging, healing begins, slowly, gently, like something growing in rich, untouched soil. But this kind of compassion must start with yourself. Because without self-compassion, everything else becomes performance. If you can't meet your own pain with kindness, your care for others will always carry a subtle tension. When you stop seeing your struggles as flaws to hide, and begin to treat them as part of the shared human experience, your presence becomes more honest. You stop needing to prove that you're strong. You start showing up just as you are. And in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. Self-compassion is not indulgence. It is discipline, in its most sacred form. The discipline to stay when things hurt. To soften when your instinct is to run. To forgive when the voice inside turns cruel. It becomes the foundation of all other forms of care. And when it is cultivated with sincerity, you become trustworthy to yourself. That trust is unshakable, because it's not based on outcomes. It's based on how you meet each moment. And as compassion deepens, something else naturally arises. Generosity. You begin to give, not because you feel pressured, but because you feel abundant. Not because you have more than enough, but because you realize that everything you hold, your time, your energy, your attention, was never truly yours to begin with. It was always meant to be shared. And here's the beauty: what you give doesn't diminish. It grows. It strengthens in the offering. This kind of generosity isn't measured in grand gestures. It lives in the small, ordinary moments. A pause to truly listen. A quiet act of kindness when no one is watching. Holding back judgment. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt. These simple acts create space. Space where trust can begin to grow. Not just between people, but within the fabric of life itself. Because the energy you give reflects the world you believe in. If you believe the world is hostile, you guard yourself. If you believe it is indifferent, you withdraw. But if you begin to trust that life responds to presence, to sincerity, to compassion, then your way of being changes. You move through the world not to defend, but to connect, not to prove, but to contribute. And in this view, every action becomes sacred. The way you speak, the way you listen, even the way you walk into a room, all of it carries energy. And compassion makes that energy clear. It removes distortion. It opens the channel. And through that openness, clarity enters. You begin to see people differently. Not as obstacles, not as extensions of your needs, but as beings in process. Just like you. This doesn't remove responsibility. It deepens it. Because now you understand. How you treat others shapes the emotional atmosphere they live in. You begin to take responsibility not just for your intentions, but for your impact. And this awareness brings a kind of spiritual maturity. You stop blaming. You stop expecting others to carry your pain. You begin to own your path. And yet, you remain open. You offer presence. Even when there's nothing to fix. Even when silence is all there is. You begin to learn the sacred art of holding space, without needing to fill it. Compassion teaches you to trust silence. To trust the quiet support of simply being there. You no longer rush to say the perfect thing. You listen with your whole being. And in that deep listening, you let others feel truly seen. And this, too, is healing. Not because you had the answer, but because you were not afraid to stay. And when you stay long enough to truly meet others where they are, something shifts within you. You begin to understand that compassion is never one-sided. It moves in both directions. The more you offer, the more you feel supported. Not always by people, not always by circumstances, but by the path itself. By the quiet knowing that you are not here to perfect anything. You are here to serve. With an open, honest, wholehearted presence. In Tibetan Buddhist teachings, compassion is often visualized as radiant light, flowing gently from the heart center, reaching out in all directions. This light doesn't seek recognition. It doesn't ask to be seen. It simply shines. And in that silent, humble shining, the world begins to shift. Ever so subtly, the weight grows lighter, the distance between hearts grows smaller, and pain becomes just a little less lonely. You begin to trust this light, not because it makes hardships disappear, but because it reminds you of something deeper. That love exists even in the hardest places. That you are not meant to escape the darkness, but to carry light into it. This is not idealism. This is responsibility. The sacred responsibility to use your presence as medicine. Your energy as a quiet offering. Your actions as a living prayer. And just as compassion uplifts those around you, it also sustains you. In moments when you feel small, when the path ahead seems unclear, when the world feels heavy and full of noise, returning to compassion brings you home. It reminds you of your place. It brings you back to meaning. Not a meaning you invent, but a truth you remember. Through the act of giving, this remembrance becomes your foundation. You no longer need constant affirmation. You no longer measure your worth by what comes back to you. Because compassion becomes self-sustaining. It becomes the current you move within. And inside that current, trust becomes effortless. Not naive trust, not blind faith, but a trust that is grounded, wide-eyed, and open-hearted. This kind of trust doesn't need guarantees. It simply asks for presence. The willingness to keep showing up. To keep offering care, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's hard. To keep choosing alignment over comfort. To keep loving even in the face of doubt. Compassion is not just a part of the path. It is the path. It is the practice. It is the reward. It is what opens the door. What carries you through. And what stays with you when everything else changes. It is not a step along the way. It is the way. And when you give from that place, you no longer wonder whether the universe sees you. Because in every breath, in every moment, you can feel, you know, that you are part of something greater. And that something is always listening. After everything you've just heard, after every breath, every pause, every truth gently revealed, layer by layer, something in you has already changed. Not because you learned something new, but because you remembered something ancient. That the universe is not your enemy. That life is not happening to you, but through you. That trust is not something you earn. It is something you return to. That surrender is not weakness. It is wisdom. That karma is not punishment, but a conversation. That emptiness is not void. It is space for clarity. You've touched the truth that silence can heal. That compassion can transform. That uncertainty can teach. And even death can whisper lessons about presence. You've glimpsed the truth that your consciousness continues. That your mind shapes your world. And that even the chaos, yes, even the chaos, holds pattern, if you are willing to slow down and truly look. This journey has never been about believing more. It's been about fearing less. Because when you stop needing to control everything, you begin to belong, not just to this life, but to the sacred flow of everything.
You don't have to do anything. You don't have to understand or even try to feel anything. Just be here, because even silent presence is a form of compassion. Like the sun, it doesn't need to be seen to warm the whole world.
Now, it's your turn. Cyclone in the comments below. Share the one insight that stayed with you. The one that whispered, "This was meant for you." Write it down, not just for me, but for you, because words make memories stronger. And your insight might be the gentle sign someone else has been waiting for. Speech balloon. And if something in you shifted, even just a little, subscribe to this channel. New content like this is made to remind you of what's already within you. Trust, presence, and the quiet courage to walk your path awake. Sleep well, breathe deeply, and carry this wisdom with you. Because even when you forget, the universe remembers.
If something here has touched your heart, leave a comment. Just a single line is enough. Who knows, your words may be the light someone else needs. And if you'd like to keep walking this path of awareness, subscribe. Not to follow a channel, but to help nurture a quiet space together.